It's time for this week's episode of Brandon Sports Talk, featuring in-depth interviews from those who are trending in the world of athletics. And now, here's the host of Brandon Sports Talk, Brandon Pate.
Welcome back to Brandon Sports Talk. In today's episode, I have the privilege to interview the New York University's assistant tennis Coach Chanmett. How are you doing today?
Hey man, thank you for having me. Doing all right, man. We're actually on spring break, so I'm down south in Atlanta, Georgia, enjoying the warm weather, as you can see.
That's wonderful. Can you talk about how you knew that you wanted to get started in coaching in college tennis?
Sure. I grew up playing tennis my whole life, was fortunate enough to be part of the University of Georgia men's tennis program, where we were number one ranked in the country a couple of years out of the 4 years I was there. Had the good fortune of learning and working for Manny Diaz, the best coach in collegiate sports history, the winningest coach in SEC tennis history, and the second coach in Georgia tennis's history program. College tennis was founded by Coach Dan McGill, and Coach Manny Diaz actually succeeded him successfully. It's really hard to do. Fill in the big footsteps of Dan McGill, but Coach Diaz did that, and I just was totally inspired and fortunate enough to work for him and be on the team underneath him. When I moved to New York City, I took a job in finance and actually wasn't able to be around tennis as much as I'd like to have been. But fortunately, I got introduced to the head coach at NYU, and because of the lack of courts in New York City, we actually practice 9 to 11 p.m. Yeah, 9 to 11 p.m. You heard that right. So I actually, go to practice every evening after work. It's really a unique and special opportunity for me, because I wouldn't be able to coach tennis anywhere else in the country at a collegiate level while working full time in finance. So I've really been fortunate enough to do both.
What was that like going to Georgia Bulldogs and getting to play collegiate tennis for them?
So to caveat that, I was manager for the team. I could have probably played at a smaller Division I program, but I got to be manager. Gave me the opportunity to be a very small part of the greatest program in history. We were number one in the country, like I mentioned earlier, and so unfortunately, I didn't get the opportunity to go out there and compete. But I practiced pretty regularly. I hit in, I set up some drills, organized practices, all of that. And it was cool because I think it's a really unique opportunity in the world to be a part of something that's the best, that's number one. And we were that at Georgia. We were number one in the country. So I just learned a lot from the players, from the coaches, the institution, the culture, the program, everything. And it really elevated me as a person.
What were some of the things that you learned as the student manager to help you along your way to get into the coaching world?
Yeah, I just got a front row seat at the best coach in college tennis history, right? Manny Diaz. And I got a front row seat at some of the best players in the world. We generally have the number one recruiting class every year in the country. And so getting to learn from some of the best players and the best coaches. Naturally, we have some of the best alumni, some of the best donors, some of the best support system. We definitely have the country in Athens, Georgia. And so just getting to learn from the best is something that I've been very fortunate to do.
How was it like serving as the East Hampton instructor?
Yeah, that's been a cool little passion project that I've taken on since I moved to the city. In COVID, when we weren't able, you move to New York City not for the weather. You don't move to New York City for the access to tennis. You definitely don't move to New York City for the friendliness of the people, but you move because there's a bunch of high aspiring, inspiring folks that you want to be around. It's the people that make New York so special. And in COVID, unfortunately, I wasn't able to do that. So I, was sitting in Atlanta actually in the heart of COVID, trying to think, as to like where these really smart, successful people would be. And I just guessed. I've never been to the Hamptons. I didn't know anything about the Hamptons. My family never, we don't know anything about the Hamptons, but I figured they were all probably out there hanging out, camping out, and playing some tennis. So I started cold calling the tennis clubs in East Hampton. I called Scott Rubenstein from East Hampton Indoor Tennis, and I, told him what I was up to, and I asked him if he would take me and let me coach tennis on the weekends. Fortunately, he told me to show up, and I did, about 2,000 miles away, and I started coaching tennis there, and I've been doing it for the last 2 summers. I also added on coaching at the Bridge, which is a golf club in Bridgehampton, during the summers on the weekends around my work, and it's been really special. I get to be around some of the smartest people in the world, some of the most successful people in the world, and I get to show them what I do best, which is get people inspired about tennis.
What has that been like, obviously teaching those people how to play tennis and obviously those high-end people how to play?
Say again, what's the question?
What has it been like, obviously teaching the high-end people of Hamptons how to play tennis?
It's a different style of coaching, right? Because it's like everything I've grown up around has been performance training and like getting better. And not to say that the folks in Long Island don't want to get better, but it's more for enjoyment, right? And it's more like it's a more social avenue for the sport. And so it's actually probably taught me a lot more about how tennis can be such a leisure activity and an enjoyment, and like a time of enjoyment for family, friends, people of different backgrounds. Whereas when you grow up in the South, it's all competitive and performance based, and like you're only training. And so I think actually going out to Long Island, especially in my career and in my later professional life, where tennis will not be probably as much of a competitive avenue for me, it's just nice to see that there are other affiliations and avenues for where tennis can lead to.
What was that experience like, getting to play professional tennis for the US Opens?
For the USTA, I played a couple ITF tournaments. I never really got up that much in the rankings, which is why I'm pursuing a career in finance in Manhattan. But getting to play USTA tournaments, it's at the highest level in the South and in the state of Georgia, and play some international tournaments. It's just I think the coolest language to meet people from all around the world, right? You might not speak English or Japanese or Chinese or French or whatever it might be, but if you can hit a good shot and give your opponent some respect and give them a light applause, you suddenly start to become friends. And I think that's what's resonated across our time in Manhattan is all these former tennis players from around the world really come together around the sport, and you share the same stories, and you've done the same drills, and you've played the same matches, and you've felt the same pressure. So it just brings people together in a really unique way.
Have you used what you learned as a professional tennis player to help you into your college coaching career?
I think so. I've thought about it a lot because it's like sometimes the best players aren't the best coaches, and the best coaches aren't the best coaches haven't been the best players. And I'm a good player, and I'd like to think that I know tennis inside and out. But I think a lot of my like shortcomings, and I often was responsible to coach myself and teach myself, and had a really good junior coach named Sanjay Jairam who taught me the ins and outs of the technical aspects of tennis. But like some of my struggles have resulted in me actually like have resulted in me being able to coach the sport better. If you get what I'm saying. So like my struggles with my backhand actually get me to like understand a backhand better, or my struggles with my serve and like my constant pursuit of getting my serve a little bit better and a higher toss or a higher pace or a more action, whatever it might be. I've just gotten to understand those motions and those patterns and those skills a little bit better than to someone who it comes naturally to. And so I think playing obviously helps a lot, but also like not being as good as I wanted to helps a lot more in terms of like seeing shortcomings and getting my players to actually work on those weaknesses, my own weaknesses.
What was that experience like, getting into college coaching and coming to New York University to become the assistant coach?
Say again, sorry, I didn't.
What was your experience like coming to New York University to become a coach and become an assistant coach for tennis?
Excellent. My grandmother's bringing me a cafe. If you want to say hello, hi.
Hi.
The experience has been really cool because look, like unlike University of Georgia, where we have the best program and the best resources and the best fans and the best courts and everything is the best, at NYU it's a little bit different. We don't have access to the courts, right? We practice 9 to 11 p.m. in the Bronx in the trap, and so the fact that these kids are willing to put up with that, they're not on scholarship, right? They're truly passionate. They love the sport. They are willing to go up at 9 p.m. after their academics, after their extracurriculars, after their internships, their jobs. They go up 9 p.m. to the Bronx to practice for 2 hours, finish at 11, get back at midnight, not get to bed by 1 a.m. is a really unique type of passion for the sport of tennis. And so for me to get to see that in a totally different way than we had it at the University of Georgia has been cool. And again, like it just like further drives my love for tennis, and getting to be around folks that have such a great appreciation for the sport is awesome.
What does a typical game day look like for you as a coach versus for your players?
So my players are, getting ready to play. They're getting ready to compete. They're focused on, making sure they see the ball well. They're loose. They're stretched out. They're mentally prepared. That they're just like in the right state of physical and mental peace to play tennis at the highest level. For me, it's more about making sure I'm in a clear-minded position to see the court well, to see the lineup well, to see how our play is progressing off different courts, how certain matches might be progressing, how certain matches might not be. I mean, after a long day of matches, I'm exhausted mentally because I've got to be so engaged on all seven, six courts of singles and then the 3 courts of doubles. And so at any given time, I'm focused on either 3 doubles matches or 6 singles matches, and trying to make sure I can help my players and equip my players to perform at the highest level, to make sure they have the right game plan, to understand how our opponents are playing, to understand our opponents' weaknesses, just, to understand where we should target. And so I think for me, it's more just like getting a good night's worth of sleep and like making sure I'm well rested. For our guys, physically, mentally, they've just got to be on their A game all the time.
Of course, as a coach, what has it been like, obviously, keeping that momentum for your players as you talk about having to practice so late at night?
Getting them, I missed the first half of the question. You cut out a little bit.
How has it been like as a coach to help those players stay motivated when obviously you have to practice so late at night?
Look, I can't do anything about that, right? It comes from the players, the motivation. There's only so much a coach can do, and so I think that's a test to our players that they love tennis, that they're willing to put in the long, hard hours, literally, to be a part of such a good program. And when they leave, I think they're much better for it, right? You got to think like a lot of these kids go into like the highest careers of finance. They're not looking to, their end result from NYU tennis is not pro tennis. It's to get a good job in Manhattan and be successful professionally. And so the fact that they're able to do all of this around their studies just makes them way more prepared than anyone else to exceed expectations in their professional career down the road.
Who are some of the teams that you face each week in your conference?
It's a lot of the UAAs. It's schools I'd never heard of growing up down south and being at the University of Georgia, these Division III Northeast schools. But they're tough, man. Hobart, Haverford, Stevens, NJIT. It's a handful of schools I've never heard of, but I'd like to say, like, at least for NYU coming in last year, my first year as a coach, we didn't have a great season on the men's side. We had a great season on the women's side. But this year we've actually reversed course with a lot of the same team, a couple newcomers. And, we beat Hobart 7-2 after we lost to them 7-2 last year. And so we reversed the score and with a very similar team. And so, these schools are tough, but the NYU kids are coming together. Our men and women are coming together and playing tough.
Of course, what has that been like, obviously, coaching both the men's and the women's team versus as a player, you were only on the men's team?
It's different. It's cool because I like to bring both teams together and inspire them together and give a lot of life lessons and, just make them better as men and women. But there's also a part of it where you have to do it separately. And coaching women is just different than coaching men. I've obviously grown up on a men's team at the University of Georgia and been around guys my whole life, but I have six sisters. So, it's just a combination of like growing up with women and being around guys my whole life where like I think I'm well positioned to handle both the men's and women's coaching positions. But it's definitely, they each have their own like challenges and strengths. And so I'm learning that, into my second year, because I think initially I always like bringing folks together and doing everything together. And so having the men's and women's teams together was like something that I love doing. But I think as I'm progressing, there are definitely times when you have to, motivate them differently or separate the practices and do different drills and hold them accountable differently. And that's just a part of it. So, that a lot of that I'm learning on the fly as well.
What is that experience like playing on your home court of New York versus obviously going to your away opponents and playing?
It's interesting. I think the biggest difference between Division One and Division Three is the culture and the togetherness of the programs, right? Like in Division One, the emphasis is like to play for each other and play for your teammates. And I don't know that I see that as much in Division Three tennis, but it's something that I'm doing my best to instill at our program at NYU. And so to that point, I think I tell these guys, NYU, we practice at the Stadium Tennis Facility. It's a public tennis facility in the Bronx, but we're going to make that thing our home court and make sure that when teams come to our house, they hear us supporting each other. They hear, our fans. We have a few fans that come out. And so I think it's been a big difference from last year to this year is how much our bench players, even though they're not playing, that they're invested in the match and they understand what's going on in the different courts and that they're loud and they're energetic and they're supportive and that our opponents feel like they're in at NYU's home court versus their own. When we go to other courts, I mean it's all right, but I don't I generally am proud of the way our team comes together and supports and kind of turns every environment into our home court in a sense. And so that's what we look to do, and I think we've done a good job of that this year.
What has that been like, obviously playing, as you said, going to like the Bronx area and playing on their court versus obviously having your own courts on your university?
Dude, it makes us tough. It makes us tough. And that's what I tell these guys, right? We're practicing in the Bronx. It's one of the most dangerous parts of America. I think there's like something like the most homicides per square mile of any place in the country, or like up there in the top 10. And so it's probably not ideal, but it definitely makes us tougher and makes us better. And we're good with that.
Can you talk about, of course, the culture that you helped build for the New York tennis program?
Sure. So just the emphasis on the culture. Yeah, I mean, like, look, University of Georgia has the best culture in the country. Manny Diaz does a great job of that. Coach Diaz does a great job of that. And I think all of our lettermen and alumni will, attest to the culture and the culture and the togetherness that comes from being a part of Georgia tennis. And I'm just looking to do my best to bring that to NYU and to, NYU and New York in general is a very competitive transactional environment. NYU kind of embodies that, right? They like the business school and like all these things, they're so competitive and they like everyone has to look out for themselves. And it's tough for these kids to understand what, playing for someone else is like and what selflessness is like and what playing, it's just like coming together for something that's way bigger than yourself. And I think they're starting to get it. And so like, the bench kids sometimes are upset that they're not playing, but they can have a huge impact on the match if they're just supportive and if they're in their, teammates' corner, they can have a bigger impact than the players. And so just getting them to buy into that and believe in it. And as a result, they see the impacts of it. We're 5-2 on the season. And it's a totally different season than last year where, we didn't have our best season. They're buying into it more in there. I think they're seeing the benefits of like the sum of all parts is, greater than the individuals.
What does the recruitment process look like for those prospective athletes looking to play college tennis?
At NYU or in general?
In general.
It's a combination of, playing tennis at the highest level and, having the right academic marks and then also having the right personality and the culture fit. And so it's a combination of those. I think, character probably comes number one because everyone can play tennis. So character is definitely number one. Grades is, the level, like I said, level is like something that just like goes without being said. But then culture number one, grades number two. Because you're not at the highest levels. You're not there to play school. You're there to play tennis. But the character is definitely like, first and foremost. From my experience at NYU, it's a little bit unique because we don't offer athletic scholarships and we don't let kids in based on their athletic accomplishments. They get admitted based on their academic accomplishments first. And so it's just, it's a little bit tougher with our academic rigor to get athletes in, which is why I'm so impressed with our players and like the season that we're having is because none of these kids were really recruited. They had to get in academically on their own right. Then they have to pay for school. A lot of them are doing second jobs and, are accommodating internships and whatnot to help compensate for the school. And then, if they have those things, then they're allowed on the tennis team and then they're a part of the tennis program. And so it's not like we get our best pick at talent, but we definitely get our best pick of like character, work ethic, discipline. motivation, like all those things. These kids are high performing athletes.
Of course, as a coach, was it like getting to see those players put on that NYU tennis uniform?
What is it like to see these kids? I mean, it's awesome. It's generally their dream to play college tennis. We have a bunch of kids who came to NYU for the opportunity to compete. And so, I just encourage them to remember they represent something much bigger than themselves now. They represent the university, they represent their families, they represent their coaches. And so, they're wearing the NYU and they have to act accordingly. And so that's a big thing that I like to emphasize.
What are some of your future plans for the NYU program moving forward as assistant coach?
I think it's just like, continuing to come together and like setting that standard of excellence across like all different aspects of the team. And so obviously Coach Choi has been here 40 years and he's done such a great job of building a great program, but just like, encouraging them to come together, be energetic, make sure, just different things that make top programs reputable. And I think that's still like at times remains a work in progress. We're definitely making, big strides this year, but just continue to do that and make sure that the standard of excellence for our program revolves around being selflessness, being selfless.
What advice would you give those high school athletes that are looking to play college tennis?
Work hard, man. It doesn't come easy, but then also, get yourself in front of coaches. I think that like it's like anything else in life. If you're doing the work, it's no good if you don't know the right people. It's no good if you know the right people and you don't, you haven't put in the work. And so it's a combination of the two. And then obviously like your culture, your character is always number one. And so just make sure you're maintaining that. If you're raised the right way, if you're playing good tennis and you've got the right grades and you get in front of the right coaches, you'll be golden.
What advice would you give those freshmen that are entering college for the first time and looking to play collegiate tennis?
Say quote one more time, sorry.
What advice would you give those first-time students that are freshmen that are entering college looking to play collegiate tennis?
Tennis is interesting because it's an individual sport where you're playing for each other. So I think the most important thing is that you focus on your court, but you learn to be selfless. Like tennis has always been an individual sport. And so I think the biggest thing that freshmen have to get used to is like the pressure of playing for other people. And so just, it's a process through your freshman year always of like, it's an individual sport, but you're playing a team sport. And so just getting used to that and getting accustomed to, competing for something bigger than yourself is always, I think, generally a bigger challenge for a lot of incoming freshmen.
What advice would you give those college students that are looking to play professional tennis after their playing career?
Professional tennis is really hard to get into. So it's like, you always want to focus on your grades, make sure you have a great backup option, and then see how your college tennis experience goes, right? You're getting free training, coaching, fitness, PT, all those things for 4 years. And so it's a pretty good test run to see how your professional tennis career will work out. I mean, I was at the University of Georgia and, we have Jan Zielinski and John Isner have gone pro. Sadia Doumbia, these guys have like made it on the pro ranks. That's only 3 guys out of like, the last 20 years, 15 years, Michael Pernfors. I mean, there's a handful of guys that have made it, but the odds are highly stacked against you. So just making sure that you always treat people the right way and you focus on your academics is something that, ends up being very important for a lot of college tennis players.
What advice would you give those college athletes that are looking to get into coaching college tennis?
Just focus on building the team, right? Playing for each other, focus on being a team leader, focus on, being a captain or supporting each other. Obviously, like understanding the ins and outs of tennis and patterns and technique is all that, and all that's important. But there's a lot of great coaches that just do a great job of motivating, inspiring, bringing together. And those are, huge aspects of being a successful college tennis coach. So I just think, outside of tennis, there's a lot of things that you can control. And if you control those things, you can still be a great college tennis coach. And that revolves around being a great team player.
That's great advice. Where can my listeners find you at on social media along with the New York tennis program app?
Yeah, we have Instagram, Twitter. You can find me on Instagram at Turbination Station, LinkedIn, Twitter, all the whole 9 yards. The NYU men's and women's tennis team also has their social media accounts. I think it's NYU men's tennis, NYU women's tennis. Unfortunately, Coach Choi, who's been around for 40 years, is not on social media. But his email and my email is on the NYU website. And then we're around Manhattan, man, and we practice in the Bronx. And so if any of your followers want to come check out practice, it's a little dangerous, but it'll be well worth it.
Thank you again for your interview and best of luck in your future with the New York tennis program as the assistant coach.
Say again?
Thank you again for your interview and best of luck in your future as the New York tennis coach.
Thanks, dude. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you. You can find Brandon Sports Talk on Facebook at Brandon Sports Talk, Instagram at Brandon Sports Talk, Twitter at Talk_Brand, and you can find me on YouTube at Brandon Sports Talk. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you again, Coach, for your interview and best of luck in your future.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
You've been watching Brandon Sports Talk. Please feel free to like, share, and subscribe to Brandon Sports Talk on social media and on YouTube.